I died. And what I saw on the other side changed everything I thought I knew, not just about life, but about the world we're living in. My name is Dorothy, and this is the story I never planned to tell, because if you had asked me before that day, I would have said I was just a regular woman, a mother, a sister, a caregiver. I wasn't a preacher. I didn't go around claiming visions or dreams. I barely had time to breathe between work and family. But when you die and stand in front of Jesus, when he shows you what's really going on behind this world's curtain, you don't get to stay silent anymore. I was chosen to see, and now I have to speak. That morning started like any other. I got up early before the sun, the same way I always do. My knees cracked when I climbed out of bed, and I chuckled to myself, whispering, "Lord, I'm getting old." The air was still and quiet, the kind of peace that comes before the house starts stirring. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and stared out the window while it brewed. The light outside was soft and golden, just beginning to stretch across the yard, kissing the trees with warmth. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, and I remember thinking, "Thank you, Jesus. One more day." I didn't know that one more day would be my last. I got dressed in my usual navy blue scrubs. Same shoes, same purse, same routine. It was like any other Wednesday. My job as a caregiver brought me into people's lives when they were at their most vulnerable, and I loved it. There was something sacred about holding someone's hand when they were in pain or helping them remember who they were when they felt forgotten. My first visit that day was with Miss Clara, who always had a word of encouragement for me, even when she was the one struggling to breathe. Then Mr. Evans, who kept a Bible beside his chair and never let a visit pass without quoting a psalm. I remember smiling as I walked from room to room, feeling blessed to serve. But by the end of the day, I was tired. My feet ached. My shoulders were tight. My phone buzzed with a text from my son. "Mama, can you bring home that sweet cornbread from Tasha's?" I smiled. That boy could eat cornbread every day and never get tired of it. I made a quick stop at the bakery, exchanged warm laughter with the woman behind the counter, and slid back into my car, cornbread bag on the passenger seat. It had started to rain. Just a gentle drizzle, nothing serious. The kind of rain that makes the trees look greener and the world feel a little quieter. I turned on my gospel playlist and hummed along. I was thinking about dinner, thinking about whether I had enough greens left at the house, whether my youngest had done his homework. It was just a normal evening drive home, until everything changed. The rain hit a little harder. The road shimmered under my headlights. I remember the way the red brake lights of the car ahead of me reflected off the wet pavement. And then, out of nowhere, headlights. Bright. Fast. Coming straight for me. I didn't have time to scream. I didn't have time to pray. I jerked the wheel, my heart pounding, but it was too late. There was a sound I'll never forget. The screech of metal, the shattering of glass, the weight of something slamming into me. And then silence. No pain, no movement, just stillness. I didn't wake up in a hospital room. I didn't float toward the ceiling in a peaceful white light. It wasn't like that. It was confusion first. Like my mind woke up before my body. I was aware, but not in the way you're aware when you're dreaming. I was aware in a way that felt too real, too sharp. I was no longer in my car. I was no longer in my body. I was above it. I saw everything at once, like time had slowed to a crawl. My car was crushed, the driver's side wrapped around the front of a truck. The windshield was shattered. Rain fell in slow motion, each droplet hanging in the air like a crystal. And then I saw me. I was slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. I should have panicked. I should have screamed. But instead I felt calm. Not peaceful exactly, but detached. Like the part of me that used to feel fear had been peeled away. Paramedics arrived. I watched them from above as they moved with frantic energy, shouting my name. "Dorothy, can you hear me?" Cutting open the door, pulling my body out. One of them, a young man with a tattoo on his forearm and panic in his eyes, was holding my wrist, checking for a pulse. I wanted to tell him I was okay. I wanted to say, "Don't worry, I'm right here." But my voice was gone. My body wasn't mine anymore. I hovered, weightless, watching this moment like I was both part of it and far beyond it. Everything around me looked different. The colors were more vivid. The sounds were muffled, but the energy of what was happening, the grief, the urgency, was almost tangible. And then I saw someone standing near the ambulance. At first, I thought it was just one of the responders, but then I looked again. It was my grandmother. She had passed away nearly 10 years ago, but there she was, standing still in the rain, not wet, not aged, just glowing. She didn't speak, but her eyes met mine, and in that gaze, I knew the truth. I had died. The moment I realized I was no longer part of this world, something incredible happened. I began to feel a pull, not physical, but deeply spiritual, like something ancient and holy was calling me. It started softly, almost like a whisper in my chest. But it grew, not louder, but deeper, like it was vibrating through every part of me. I turned, or maybe I didn't turn in the way we understand turning, but suddenly, I was facing it, a light, but not like sunlight or headlights or any kind of light I had ever seen on Earth. This light was alive. It shimmered and moved like it had breath, like it knew me. And somehow, I knew it too. There was no fear, no hesitation. I didn't wonder where I was going or question whether I should follow. I simply knew I belonged to whatever was calling me. And as I drew nearer, the warmth of that light wrapped around me, not like heat from a flame, but like an embrace, like being held by something that had waited for me my whole life. It felt like every ache, every wound I had ever carried just melted away. There was no weight, no sadness, only love, pure, undeniable love. Then I heard a voice, not with my ears, but in the very fabric of who I am. It wasn't booming or loud. It didn't need to be. It was more real than any sound I'd ever heard. It was him, Jesus. He called me by name, just one word, Dorothy. But in that one word, I heard everything. Recognition, compassion, joy, and a kind of sadness that made my soul tremble. I had never known a voice could carry so much meaning. And in that instant, I knew. I was going to see him. I wasn't just being drawn toward a light. I was being called to meet the one who had formed me, watched me, walked with me through every dark valley, even when I didn't know he was there. I was going to see Jesus. As I moved closer, I became more aware, not just of where I was, but of what I was leaving behind. I could feel the earth getting smaller, like a distant memory. All the worries, regrets, and pain that had once weighed so heavily on me were now faint echoes. I wasn't thinking about bills or stress or unanswered prayers. I was thinking about him. Every part of me was drawn to him. It felt like returning to the place I was always meant to be. And then I saw him. There is no way to truly describe what it's like to stand in front of Jesus. Every word I've ever heard used, majestic, radiant, holy, falls short. He wasn't just beautiful. He was beauty itself. His eyes, I can barely speak about them without weeping. They held the depth of oceans, the fire of stars, and a love so intense I felt undone just looking into them. He saw me, not like people see you when you're dressed up or when you've accomplished something. He saw every part of me, every secret, every sin, every hurt. And still, he loved me. I fell. I don't know if my body had knees in that realm, but my soul bowed. There was no pride left in me, no defense, no explanation, just reverence, just worship. In that moment, I understood what holiness meant, not as a religious word, but as a living, breathing reality. I was in the presence of someone utterly perfect, utterly pure, and yet he didn't push me away. He welcomed me, and then he spoke again. "Dorothy, rise." His voice didn't just speak to my ears, it spoke to my spirit. And with that one sentence, I felt strength return, not like earthly strength, but like divine permission to stand in his presence. I rose, not because I deserved to, but because he told me to. And when I looked into his face, I saw something I didn't expect. Sorrow. Yes, there was joy and love beyond measure, but behind that, there was a sorrow so deep it felt like the heart of heaven itself was breaking. I didn't understand. I was standing in perfection, in the presence of the Prince of Peace. Why would sorrow live in his eyes? But before I could ask, he reached out his hand and touched mine. And when he did, I saw everything. It wasn't a vision like a movie or a dream. It was knowledge, all at once, flooding into me like light through glass. I saw the world, not as I had known it, but as he sees it. I saw pain wrapped in pride. I saw people desperate for love, chasing after things that would never satisfy. I saw deception, so deep, so wide, that most didn't even know they were lost. And I saw spiritual chains, so many chains, wrapped around minds, around hearts, even around entire churches. Chains made not of metal, but of lies. I cried. I couldn't help it. It wasn't just sadness. It was grief. The kind of grief that shakes you to your bones. I whispered, "Lord, what is happening?" And he looked at me with such kindness, but also such urgency. "Come," he said, "there is something you must see." And then everything shifted. The light didn't disappear, but it moved. Or maybe I moved. It's hard to explain. One moment I was standing before him, and the next I was being carried through something that felt like a tunnel, but not like anything I've ever known on earth. It was light, but also movement. It was sound, but also stillness. It was like traveling through the heart of truth itself. As I moved, I began to hear music, not with instruments or human voices, but with something purer. It was as if the universe was singing, and somehow I understood every note. All around me, the tunnel shimmered with images, memories, moments, choices I had made, but I wasn't seeing them from my eyes. I was seeing them through his. Moments I thought were small or forgotten were glowing with significance. Times when I had chosen love over pride, when I had prayed for someone quietly, when I had shown kindness even in pain. He remembered it all. He valued it all. Nothing had been wasted. I wept again, not out of shame, but out of awe. Every action, every thought, every word, it mattered. Not 1 second of my life had been hidden from him, and he loved me still. I began to understand something deeper. The purpose of life isn't success or recognition. It's love. It's obedience. It's truth. And the one who gave me breath had never stopped watching over me, even when I felt most alone. And then, for the first time, I understood why he had sorrow in his eyes. Because the world he made, the people he loved, had forgotten him. They had forgotten who they are. And I knew, even before he said it, that what he was about to show me next would change everything. The moment Jesus touched my hand, I was no longer surrounded by the warmth and glory of his presence. I was standing in what looked like the world, but not the world as I had known it. This was the world through his eyes, and once you see it that way, you can never unsee it. Everything was the same, yet completely different. Cities stretched before me, busy streets, flashing lights, bustling crowds, but there was something hovering over it all, something most people couldn't see. It was thick, dark, like a mist made not of fog but of something living, something heavy. It pulsed like it had breath, like it had intention. It was darkness, not a lack of light, but a force, a presence, creeping into every corner of the world. I watched as people went about their lives, completely unaware of the weight surrounding them. They worked, they laughed, they scrolled on their phones, they made plans, but over their heads, wrapping around their minds and hearts, were chains, spiritual chains. I could see them clearly now. Some were thin and loose, others were thick and tight, but all of them had the same source: deception. The kind that doesn't scream at you or drag you into sin all at once. The kind that whispers slowly, gently. The kind that makes you think you're free while it wraps tighter around your soul. I saw churches filled with people, singing, preaching, lifting hands, but something was wrong. In many of them, the Spirit wasn't there. It was like watching people perform in an empty theater. The words were right, the actions were familiar, but the fire was gone. The enemy had slipped in, not with horns and violence, but with comfort, with distraction, with pride. He had convinced people that feelings were truth, that tradition was power, that God was just another option in a long list of life strategies. And people bought it. They bought it because it felt good. It felt safe. But it wasn't real. It wasn't him. And then I saw something that made my soul ache. I saw people fighting, arguing online, protesting in the streets, dividing in churches, even in families, all over things that didn't matter the way they thought they did. They were pawns in a larger game, and they didn't even realize it. The enemy wasn't attacking head-on. He was setting traps, confusion, outrage, distraction, and people were walking right into them, believing they were standing for truth, when in reality, they were just deepening the divide. That's when Jesus spoke again. "This is the deception," he said, and I understood. The enemy doesn't need to make people worship him directly. All he needs is to make them forget who they are, what they're here for, and who their real enemy is. And he's done it masterfully. People aren't walking away from God out of rebellion most of the time. They're walking away because they're too tired, too busy, too entertained to even look for him. And while their eyes are closed, the darkness grows. Then everything shifted again. Jesus took me deeper, and this time, what I saw pierced me in a way I wasn't ready for. I saw people divided, deeply, painfully divided, not just in politics or beliefs, but in identity. And the line I saw drawn across hearts and minds was one of the oldest and most powerful tools the enemy has ever used: race. I saw Black people carrying burdens that stretched back generations. I could feel the weight of anger, of sorrow, of trauma passed down like inheritance. Some didn't even know why they were angry anymore. It had become part of their bones. Others carried it in silence, hiding the pain behind strength because they didn't feel allowed to be weak. There was a heaviness in their spirit, not just from the past, but from a constant feeling of being unseen, unheard, and devalued. And it wasn't imaginary. It was real. It had roots. But Jesus showed me that the enemy had been twisting that pain, feeding it, nurturing resentment in the shadows, whispering lies into the ears of a people he feared because of their purpose. And then I saw white people. Many looked confused, hesitant, afraid to speak, afraid to feel, afraid to even ask questions. They carried a different burden: guilt, shame, a sense of inherited blame that they didn't know what to do with. Some overcompensated, desperately trying to prove they weren't what the world said they were. Others shut down completely, tired of being told they were the problem, tired of feeling like nothing they did would ever be enough. I saw division growing, not from natural hatred, but from wounds that had never healed, from voices that had never listened, from truths that had been distorted into weapons. And then Jesus said something that shook me to the core. They are not each other's enemies. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. I saw the spiritual realm behind the fight. I saw demonic forces stirring division, stoking flames, spreading lies, whispering to Black people, "They will never love you. Stay angry. Stay strong. Stay distant." And whispering to white people, "You're guilty. You're broken. You'll never be free of the past." Both sides were being lied to. Both sides were being played. And the enemy was laughing. Jesus turned to me with urgency in his voice. "Do you see? This is not about race. This is about control, about blindness, about identity." He showed me that the true identity of every person on earth is not black or white, rich or poor, male or female. It is mine. That's what he said. They are mine, and the enemy has blinded them to that truth. Tears streamed down my face. The enemy had hijacked history, weaponized wounds, and created an illusion so powerful, entire generations had fallen into it. But underneath it all, every soul was created by the same God, loved by the same Savior, called to the same purpose, to live in truth, in unity, in Him. I understood now why Jesus looked sorrowful. It wasn't just because of sin or rebellion. It was because His children were at war with each other, thinking they were enemies, while the real enemy watched from the shadows, unnoticed and unchallenged. I fell to my knees again, this time from heartbreak. "Lord," I cried, "what can we do?" He placed his hand on my shoulder and said gently but firmly, "Tell them the truth. Tell them who they are. Tell them they belong to me. Some will hear, some will not. But the truth must be spoken." And in that moment, I felt a shift in my spirit. I wasn't just there to witness. I was there to carry a message, a warning, a call. The world wasn't just deceived. It was being led into deeper bondage, and the only thing that could break the spell was truth, spoken in love, rooted in Him. The enemy feared truth. That's why he worked so hard to keep it buried under pain, pride, and lies. But now I had seen, and I knew I could never stay silent again. The next thing I saw felt like stepping into a world that was both futuristic and terrifyingly real. Jesus showed me what was coming, what the world would look like if it kept walking the path it was on. And it wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't some distant dystopia from a movie. It looked clean, efficient, advanced. At first glance, it even looked peaceful, but the peace was a mask. I found myself in a city, massive, sprawling, glowing with lights that didn't flicker. Everything was silent, but not because it was nighttime. It was the kind of silence that feels unnatural, like someone pressed mute on the whole world. People filled the streets, but no one spoke. They moved in synchronized patterns, like they were following invisible instructions. No one made eye contact. No one smiled. Their eyes were fixed on something just in front of their faces, glowing streams of information that floated in the air like holograms only they could see. It wasn't phones anymore. It was something more, something inside them. Jesus stood beside me, and I didn't have to ask what I was looking at. I already knew. This was where the world was heading if people didn't wake up. I watched as a woman, maybe in her 20s, walked into a store. She didn't carry a purse. She didn't speak to a cashier. She just waved her hand in front of a scanner, and the door opened. She selected a few items, passed through another scanner, and left. No interaction, no exchange. Everything was automated, controlled, efficient. It looked impressive, but it felt hollow. Then I saw a line of people, dozens at first, then hundreds, standing quietly, waiting patiently. I moved closer and saw what they were waiting for. One by one, they were stepping up to a sleek white table. A man in a sterile-looking uniform was placing something beneath the skin of their right hands. A small device. Smooth, seamless, almost invisible. Some looked nervous, but most looked eager, grateful. Like they believed this was a blessing, a solution, an answer. I turned to Jesus, my spirit heavy. Lord, what is this? He didn't look away. He said, "This is how it begins." I understood immediately. This wasn't the mark, not yet. But it was the pathway, a deception disguised as convenience, a gift that would become a chain. It started with simplicity, with ease, with promises of safety, access, and inclusion. But behind those promises was something far more dangerous, a plan to separate people from dependence on God and replace it with dependence on the system, a counterfeit kingdom. I saw churches promoting it, pastors standing on stages with lights and screens, preaching sermons about how this new technology was a gift from God. They said it would help the church, bring people together, protect children, secure finances, ensure health. And their people believed them. I watched as congregations lined up after service to receive the implant, smiling, thanking their leaders, convinced that they were stepping into the future with faith. But I could see what they couldn't. As each implant was placed under the skin, a faint dark mark spread around it. Not visible to the human eye, but in the spirit, it was there, an invisible chain linking them to something much bigger, much darker. They weren't being forced. That was the brilliance of the deception. They were choosing it, welcoming it, celebrating it. I turned to Jesus again, desperate. Why can't they see? He looked at me, eyes filled with sorrow and mercy. Because they do not ask me. They trust the world's wisdom over mine. That sentence broke something in me. It was true. People were so busy chasing security, progress, and approval that they had stopped seeking God's voice. They didn't pray for discernment. They didn't wait for His direction. They just followed what felt right, what seemed smart, what was popular. And in doing so, they were walking straight into bondage. And then He showed me what came after. I saw governments around the world united like never before. They spoke of peace, of unity, of rebuilding society into something better, something fair. They promoted the implant not as a choice, but eventually as a necessity. Without it, you couldn't access healthcare, couldn't travel, couldn't work, couldn't buy food. At first, it was optional, then expected, and finally required. Not with force, with silence, with doors that quietly closed one by one until the only way forward was to say yes. I wanted to scream, to shake people, to wake them up, but I couldn't. This was a vision. I wasn't there to intervene. I was there to understand. And then I realized Jesus wasn't showing me this to scare me. He was preparing me. He was giving me a message that had to be shared. Because what came next wasn't just about systems or politics. It was about worship, about allegiance, about hearts. Suddenly the vision shifted again, and I saw something that brought me to my knees. I saw the spiritual reality of identity, not just the individual kind, but the kind that had been under attack for generations. I saw how people had forgotten who they were, and how the enemy had taken full advantage of that. And this time, Jesus showed me something very specific, what had been happening with race, not just in the physical realm, but in the spiritual one. I saw both black and white people, millions of souls, living under labels that had become prisons. For my black brothers and sisters, I saw the pain stretching back centuries, slavery, injustice, fear, but also pride, strength, heritage. The enemy didn't erase those things. He twisted them. He used pain as fuel for bitterness. He whispered into the ears of many, "You will never be enough. They will always look down on you. You must protect yourself. You must hold on to that anger." And over time, that whisper became a voice, a strong, seductive voice that began to sound like truth. Then I saw my white brothers and sisters, and the enemy had not left them untouched. To them, he whispered a different lie. "You are the problem. You were born guilty. No matter what you do, you can never repay the debt. Hide, apologize, but don't speak. Don't question." And that lie sank deep, creating confusion, defensiveness, shame. Both sides were in chains, different chains, same enemy. And then I heard Jesus say it again. They are not each other's enemies. I broke. Right there. My spirit cried out because I saw it. The war wasn't between black and white. It was between light and darkness, between truth and deception. And the enemy was using race like a weapon, not to heal wounds, but to deepen them, to divide God's people, to keep them from seeing each other as family. Jesus turned to me, his voice both fierce and tender. "There is no black, there is no white, there is only my people." And in that moment, I saw a glimpse of heaven, every nation, every tribe, every color, worshiping together, not one above the other, not one more or less, just one people, his people. That was the truth. And the enemy had been fighting that truth since the beginning. I asked Jesus through sobs, "How do we fix this? How do we break these lies?" And he said, "Tell them. Tell them who they are. Tell them they are mine. Tell them I died for all, not for color, not for status, but for souls." His words burned in my heart like fire, and I knew, from that moment on, I couldn't look at people the same way. Not by race, not by background, only by spirit, only by love. The enemy's greatest fear is not that we will rise up against him with weapons. It's that we will rise up in unity, that we will stop listening to his lies and start walking in truth, that we will recognize each other not as enemies, but as brothers and sisters, that we will see ourselves not as black or white, but as children of the living God. And that, Jesus said, is where the real battle begins, not with power, not with politics, but with truth, spoken boldly, lived deeply, no matter the cost. Jesus took me to a place unlike any I had ever seen. It was vast, like an open expanse, but not barren. It was full of presence, full of promise. There was no sky, no ground, yet I was standing and breathing. Everything around me shimmered with purpose. And then I noticed what filled the space. Souls. Not people in bodies, not ghosts. These were beings of light, pure, glowing with potential. They floated and moved with grace, untouched by time or pain. And Jesus said, "These are the ones who have yet to be born." I looked at them and felt such awe. Each one was unique, yet connected. I sensed their assignments, their divine callings. They weren't random. They weren't accidents waiting to happen. They were sent with intention. Each soul carried gifts, Some carried music, others wisdom, others healing or compassion or leadership. Each one was designed by the Father to fulfill something specific, something eternal. But then Jesus spoke again, and his words changed the joy I felt into heartbreak. When they enter the world, he said, the enemy begins his work. And I saw it happen. I saw a soul descend from that holy place into a family on earth. The moment the baby was born, the battle began. Some were born into homes of love and prayer, others into chaos, addiction, or cold indifference. I watched as that light, the same light I had just seen glowing so purely, began to dim. Not all at once, but slowly. Through abuse, through rejection, through lies whispered early and repeated often. You're not good enough. You're a mistake. You don't matter. I saw little girls who had once danced freely in the spirit, now hiding their gifts because someone laughed at them or told them to be quiet. I saw little boys who once carried courage shrink into themselves because they were told real men don't cry, don't feel, don't hope. I saw how culture, media, broken systems, and broken families shaped children into versions of themselves that God never intended. And all the while, the enemy was watching, twisting, working overtime to make sure they never discovered who they truly were. Jesus showed me people chasing careers they were never meant to pursue, living lives that looked successful but felt hollow. I saw women who had healing in their hands stuck in toxic relationships because they thought they were unworthy of real love. I saw men meant to lead nations lost in addiction and shame, paralyzed by fear of failure. The enemy didn't need to destroy them outright. He just needed to keep them distracted, keep them doubting, keep them disconnected from their Creator. I asked, brokenhearted, Lord, how do we stop it? And Jesus looked at me with eyes that saw generations. Tell them who they are. Tell them why they were created. And most importantly, tell them I have not forgotten them. Those words struck deep into me, because in this world, people don't just forget God. They believe He's forgotten them, that He's moved on, that their mistakes, their failures, their past disqualify them from any hope of purpose. But Jesus showed me that wasn't true, not even close. The moment a person turns their eyes to Him, even after years of silence or sin, heaven rushes in with open arms. There is no expiration date on God's love, no limit to His mercy. He is always waiting, always calling. And then He showed me something else, something that gave me hope. In the middle of the darkness, I saw lights rising from the earth, small at first, then more, then hundreds, then thousands. These lights came from people, ordinary people, who had said yes to the call. They weren't famous or powerful in the world's eyes. Some were mothers at home, raising children in truth. Some were teachers, quietly speaking life into students. Some were janitors, pastors, nurses, teenagers, people who had refused to be swallowed by the lie. They carried truth, and when they spoke it, it cut through the darkness like lightning. Jesus called them His warriors, not warriors with swords or guns, warriors with voices, with compassion, with unshakable faith. Their strength wasn't in their titles or their platforms. It was in their obedience. And every time they spoke truth, when they prayed, when they forgave, when they loved those who didn't deserve it, chains broke. The enemy trembled, because lies only have power in silence. But truth is explosive. It's contagious. It sets people free. I turned to Jesus and I knew I had to go back. My heart cried out, I want to stay here with you. And I meant it. After everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt, I didn't want to return to that broken world. But Jesus looked at me with a purpose that burned. Your time is not finished. There are many who need to hear what you have seen. He touched me again, and I felt it, like being pulled through water, but not water, through layers of reality, being squeezed back into something too small. My spirit resisted, not out of rebellion, but because I had tasted heaven, and nothing on earth could compare. The peace, the truth, the nearness of him, it was everything. But he had chosen to send me back, and I had to obey. As I returned, I saw one final vision. 2 paths, one wide, smooth, easy, filled with people laughing, dancing, living without concern. But as they walked further, the light around them faded until they were swallowed in shadow, still smiling, still unaware. The other path was narrow, rocky, steep. Only a few walked it. They stumbled, they bled. But at the end was Jesus, arms open, face radiant. I looked at both paths and asked, why do most choose the wide one? Because it costs nothing, Jesus said, but it leads to everything being lost. I returned to my body gasping, choking, as if coming up from deep underwater. I was back in the hospital. Machines beeped. My body ached. My eyes fluttered open. My family was around me, stunned. I had been declared gone. But God had another plan, and as they wept and clung to my hand, I knew. I couldn't stay quiet. I had to tell them. I had to tell you, because now I've seen. I've seen the truth behind the world's curtain. I've seen the battle for souls, the war for identity, the trap of comfort that leads to chains. And I've seen the love of a Savior who still reaches out, still forgives, still calls each of us by name. He is not far. He is not silent. He is waiting. And now the choice is yours. Will you keep walking the easy road, the one everyone praises, the one that asks nothing of you? Or will you dare to follow the narrow path, the one that leads to life, to truth, to Him? I've done my part. I've spoken what I was shown. And now, I leave you with the same invitation that pulled me from death into light. Come. Come before it's too late. Come while there is still time. Come, because He's calling your name.